Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know it's like the first day of reInvent. You probably have 100 other things you could do, probably 1,000 if you're like extended to Vegas. But very thankful to have you here, spending the next 1 hour with Jeremiah and I. I hope you're all here because we love IAM and want to know more about it. All right. So today we'll be spending time talking about the new IAM Access Analyzer features and how they can help you on your journey to least privilege. I'm Ujjwal. I'm a principal product manager on the IAM Access Analyzer team, and I'm joined here by Jeremiah. He's a senior software development manager on the same team as well. So to talk about the agenda, today we are going to first start by looking at how AWS or we at AWS think about access controls across your AWS environments, talk about the concept of least privilege or the principle of least privilege, and specifically who's responsible for orchestrating least privilege in our AWS environment. And then finally, we're going to talk about, a bulk of the session is going to be about IAM Access Analyzer and how it helps you simplify least privilege or the journey to least privilege. Now, we are going to be brave and we are going to be doing live demos. I can assure you these were working like 30 minutes ago, but if we run into like some kind of kinks or bumps, just bear with us. We'll make it work. We'll get through it all together. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about access controls for your AWS estate and how do you think about all the different access controls that AWS has to offer. So this is a good visual of how we think about access controls within AWS and how you can get started. So we broadly classify those as two. So you have data parameters, which are coarse-grained controls that you would set primarily at your AWS organization level, so like a multi-account setup. These are things you could think of as like your service control policies, for example. And then you have fine-grained permissions, which are things like your IAM roles, resource permissions, all of those that you set primarily at the account level or at a per account level. Now, generally, when people think about managing permissions for these fine-grained permissions, it's like a permissions life cycle. So the way we sort of organize is we think of this as you basically start by setting the right permissions, verifying access over time, and then refining permissions over time periodically. Now, there's this definition or concept of least privilege that I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with, but I'm going to still just quickly go through it. Least privilege essentially means that your users should have the right permissions and only the right permissions that they need to build their applications or do their jobs. So talking about least privilege, least privilege is great, right? But who's actually responsible for getting your environments to least privilege permissions? Well, we think broadly these are organized in two personas. Now, these might have different names depending on what company you work for, but broadly, how we've heard our customers organize is there is a centralized persona, which could be like your cloud platform team, your central security team, CloudSec, there's multiple different names. And then you have your decentralized team, which is generally your application team, your developer team. These two personas broadly collaborate to get your AWS permissions to least privilege. So you would be sort of happy to know that we actually have people representing these two personas right here with us today, and that's us. So for the purposes of this session, we are going to be embodying the security team and the developer team, and we're going to take you through this session, and hopefully we'll do a good job of it.
Hey, Ujjwal.
Yep.
You look different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm the security team. You see, Jeremiah, security can sometimes do that to you.
Sorry.
All right. So I'm channeling my inner security team, right? So in my role as a central security team, what is my goal? My goal is essentially to set up builders like Jeremiah up for success to build and to make sure they adhere to my company's security standards. Now, in order to fulfill this goal, I have a few responsibilities. My first responsibility is actually defining what my security standards really are. So these could be defining like what critical permissions should be restricted in terms of the access controls, or building preventative guardrails so that those critical permissions are not granted to the people who don't need it. The second is creating data perimeters. These are the coarse-grained controls that we talked about, making sure we establish a data perimeter, and generally that happens at the organization level or at a multi-account level. The third responsibility that I have is to actually configure or track or inspect my IAM configurations to make sure that I can actually notify my teams when their permissions go broader than what I expect. And then finally, making sure the security team and my builders have the right tools to be able to securely build in AWS. So that was my role in the central security team. For this session specifically, we're going to focus on the two roles on the left, or on your right, I guess. And we're going to talk about how do you set the right security standards and inspect permissions for those standards, and how do you inspect IAM permissions over time and notify your teams when they get broad. All right, so that was my role as the security team. Hey, Jeremiah, what do you do as a developer?
Well, as a developer, as you might imagine, my goal is to build things, right? Build things that satisfy, the business objectives that our company has. But because I know Ujjwal is going to hound me if I don't do that with security in mind, it's also my goal to keep him off my back. So within that goal, I have a few different roles. So one is on the tooling side, basically understand the ecosystem of what things AWS offers, what third-party tools are out there for me to use to build things more efficiently, more securely. Also, when it comes to defining permissions, I need to make sure that the resources that I provision in AWS also have the right access. And of course, I want to do that keeping in mind our company's security standards to make sure that Ujjwal is, happy. And then over time, like as my application evolves, I want to make sure that I continue to refine and modify those permissions, not only to ensure that it keeps working, but that it doesn't have any more permissions than what it absolutely needs. So that's what I'm going to do. And similar to Ujjwal, for the purpose of this talk, I'm focused on these two things on the right. Turns out my right is your right, because we're actually kind of looking at the same thing.
I think I got that wrong.
That's okay. And so make sure that we adhere to security best practices and make sure that we refine permissions over time so that our application only gets what it needs.
All right, so now that we understand our respective roles, let's dive into IAM Access Analyzer. IAM Access Analyzer is a feature within IAM, and it helps you analyze, as the name says, analyze access in IAM. Specifically, it helps you simplify your journey to least privilege. Now, least privilege, the way we want our customers to think about least privilege is not a destination, it is a journey. So the reason I say that is because as you build applications in AWS, your teams might change, your infrastructure setup might change, even your use cases might change. So with that in mind, we like to think of least privilege as more of a journey than a destination. So as you're on this journey, where does Access Analyzer actually fit in? Right here. So Access Analyzer basically fits in when you're setting your fine-grained permissions on your IAM roles, your resource permissions, all of that good stuff. So diving into this, the permissions lifecycle that we discussed, Access Analyzer has tools across each of these 3 steps in the permissions lifecycle. So Access Analyzer can help you set the right permissions right from the outset. It can help you verify access with findings so that you can review who can access what over time. And it also helps you identify and remove broad access so you can refine permissions over time as well. So that being said, let's dive right into the set permissions specific part of the lifecycle. And to do that, I would like our resident developer expert, Jeremiah, to walk us through it.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks, Ujjwal. Yeah. Here, you want to change places with me, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not stealing your thunder.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you stay over there. All right. So on the set permissions, effectively the reason that I'm handling this part as the developer is because, well, in a decentralized model, I'm the one authoring the policies, right, that will describe what my application needs. However, I know that Ujjwal cares about what I'm going to write, and he has thoughts. He has presumably defined the security standards for our organization, or at least contributed to those. And so he would like to review the policies that I'm going to write. But if there's, well, let's say it's not just me. Let's say there's 100 of me who are authoring policies. He's going to get overwhelmed. So our goal is to automate policy review. And that's what we're trying to do at the set phase. So before we even upload policies into AWS, we want to make sure that they have been verified to meet our security standards. Okay, and so why do we want to do this? Well, because for me, I want to experiment, I want to build things quickly, but I want to, I want to be safe, mostly just so Ujjwal doesn't bother me about it. And what does Ujjwal want to do? Well, he wants that to happen as smoothly and quickly as possible so that he can focus on other more important things.
I got things to do.
Yeah, he's got things to do. Okay, so we have for quite some time had this feature in IAM Access Analyzer called policy validation. And what policy validation does is it actually uses a set of, you could think of them as like AWS defined best practices, as well as like basic syntax checks and things like that, to ensure that your policies are functional and coherent.
Yep.
Might even say sane. Like there are probably some things you should really think twice about doing. And so you can see this in the console. If you use the IAM policy editor, you'll see as you're editing the policy down at the bottom, there's security warnings, errors, regular warnings, and then suggestions for things you should consider. And all of those are generated from policy validation. However, because we're AWS and we make web services and not web consoles, well, you can also access this functionality via API. So we have a validate policy API. And how this works is, well, as you might, very similar to the console. You basically pass your policy into the API. It's the only parameter. And then we generate findings that get returned to you. And so these include things like if your policy is overly permissive, if you have some kind of syntax error, like you're missing an action, could also just be basic JSON syntax challenges. Or if there are some non-security related best practices, like you're trying to do you have a date field, but you don't have a valid date in there. And then other like stylistic improvements. So just good hygiene. So if you're not using validate policy today to examine your policies, it's a nice, easy, just kind of sanity check to make sure your policy is going to, do something that is reasonable. Okay, however, last night, yes, we announced a brand new feature, which is custom policy checks. So validate policy will check your policies for things that AWS thinks you should care about, which is very, very broad and very general, but not at all specific to the things that your organization believes are important. So with custom policy checks, we have 2 new APIs, and those 2 APIs are things that you can configure. And when I say configure, well, you can basically pass in a parameter that says, here's the policy, and here's the thing that represents my security standard or something that I care about. Check the policy against that stuff, okay? And how that works is you pass those two things in. So in the case of our check no new access API, you pass in it says previous and new policy, but you can think of it as I'm going to pass in a policy, and then I'm going to pass in a reference. That reference policy could be the old policy, and if you pass in the old policy, check no new access will tell you this new version of the policy does not grant any additional access, or it does. Okay? So if you're trying to ensure that things are scoping down over time, you could use that kind of a check to ensure that you're not adding any new permissions. Of course, sometimes, a lot of times developers, when they add new functionality, will want to add new permissions. So maybe that style of check isn't as valid. So you might want to use something that we would call a reference policy. Reference policy you can think of as kind of like a soft permission boundary. Okay? So you define, here's kind of the universe of everything that's okay. If you are trying to use anything that's outside of this, that should fail. Make sense? Okay. And in the event that the check fails, policies can get pretty large, and you probably have a lot of statements. We've actually also, we will return to you which statement contains some offending permission that is failing the check. The second API, which is actually a much simpler API, is called check access not granted. And so in that case, you pass in the policy that you want to check, and you pass in a list of up to 100 actions. And then this API will tell you if that policy is attempting to grant access to any of those actions. So you can think of these as like, these are my forbidden actions or my, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this actions. Okay. And similarly, it'll return pass or fail and which statement contains the issue. Okay. So our pro tip, although I don't think you necessarily needed me to tell you this, is that you should become besties with these APIs because they're very flexible, they can do a lot for you, and they can save you a lot of time. So you might ask yourself, okay, so in the case of validate policy, we're doing syntax checking, we're just parsing the JSON and looking at things to see if there's weird stuff in the policy. But these two new checks are not doing that. They are actually using our secret sauce, which we call automated reasoning. Okay. So automated reasoning, well, let me take a step back real quick. I am a math nerd. Okay, that was my first love. Math is my first love. Anybody else here? Math nerds? Yes?
Oh, few.
Yes. Yep. Okay, great. Well, when I went to college, there was two paths you could take in math. You could either do pure math or you could do applied math. Now, I was allergic to anything applied. Okay, I was like, whoa, that's terrible. I wanted to do pure math, right? So we'd do proofs, right? Lots of symbols. Anything that had numbers in it, I was like, this is awful. And then, of course, after I got out of college, it's like, oh, well, unless I want to become a professor, I probably can't get a job. So I'd probably better use some real numbers at some point. The interesting thing is automated reasoning is actually kind of, sort of, not really either of those. It's like applied pure math. Okay, here, let me take a step back. Let me try that again. Basically, we do mathematical proofs to guarantee, some property of the system, right? So that's what we're doing. So when you say, hey, is it possible for this policy to grant this role access to delete a DynamoDB table? We will go, well, let's use some math and construct a proof and see if it is actually possible in any conceivable case. And so if we say nope, well, that means nope. Okay? So this diagram is basically what it's representing is you provide the policies, the question that you want to ask. We model how AWS, IAM, and authorization works. We turn all that into math. We feed it into these fancy programs called SMT solvers, and out the other end comes this mathematical proof. It's pretty cool. If you want to learn more about automated reasoning, yeah, we've published a lot of papers, a lot of blogs. There have been several past reInvent talks you can find as well. Yeah, I encourage you to go check those out. Okay, but enough about that. Let's get back to the new APIs. So check no new access, as I said, means you can test a policy against a reference policy. So in addition to validate policy in our validation box, now we also have check no new access. So make sure we didn't introduce anything new that we shouldn't have. As I said, it takes two policies. So updated policy and a reference policy, and then checks to see if there is any new access above and beyond what's in the reference policy. Pass, fail, and gives you some helpful debugging information. So if for some reason it failed, you can quickly zero in on the statement that had the failure. Check access not granted. Again, this you want to use if you want to ensure that a list of critical actions is not granted by the policy. So now we have that new API as well. And yep, again, takes a policy, a list of up to 100 IAM actions, and then checks to see if at least one of them is allowed by the policy. Pass, fail, and tells you which statement that occurred in. Okay. So to review, validate policy has been around for a while. And because this is like things that we think everybody should do, is a good set of defaults for you to follow, a good set of best practices. That is complementary. You can just call that service as many times as you want. For these check no new access things, because they use automated reasoning, because they are highly customizable and configurable to whatever your needs are, those do incur charges. So, and you can find all the pricing information and everything on our website. Okay, so APIs are cool, and console is cool and all of that, but what we expect, how we expect people to actually use this is probably in something like CI/CD, right? So developer's gonna author policy, developer's gonna make an update to the policy, and when they do, we want to automatically run these checks, so that way security people, like Ujjwal here, never have to be bothered in that process. At least not unless there is a failure and the developer really thinks they need the permission that is in the policy that caused the failure. Okay? So in talking to several customers about this and planning this feature, what we found was their expectation was that this functionality would automate something like 80 to 90% of their policy reviews. So they wouldn't have to manually look at any policies, because as long as it passes these automated checks, no problem. Just let that update flow through. So it could save you a lot of time and ensure that everybody's moving quickly and safely. Okay. Now, if you're a really creative person, you might think, well, hey, CI/CD, why would it even happen at build time? Why wouldn't I have like a pre-commit hook or some other place even earlier in the development process where this check gets run from to give the developer feedback even earlier? Absolutely could do that. It's just an API. So yeah, shift left is our pro tip. We give the developers feedback early enough in the process, it'll keep everything moving quickly. Okay. Speaking of, again, we talked about how these policies, or these APIs take policies. You might think to yourself, well, I don't define my policies as policies. I use infrastructure as code. I use CloudFormation. I use Terraform. So maybe these APIs don't help me out all that much. Well, we feel you, and we thought about this. And so there are some open source tools there, and these tools have been around for a little while. The first one is called CFN Policy Validator. And what this does is basically takes your policy that is defined in CloudFormation and extracts the policy out. Okay, so like in this case, let's say we called validate, right? Because that was an old API that we've had for a while. And what it will do is it'll go, oh, okay, here's the policy. But this policy contains an attribute, which is myQArn. Well, we have no idea what the ARN is going to be at this moment because that doesn't get assigned until the resource gets created. So CFN policy validator says no problem. I'll just turn that into something that looks like a real ARN. So that way it's a valid policy and we can call these APIs. Yep. Okay, so yeah, and that's just in GitHub. So yeah, feel free to go use that. We also, because I know lots and lots and lots of folks love Terraform, we also have Terraform IAM Policy Validator. And guess what Terraform IAM Policy Validator does? Well, basically the same thing as CFN Policy Validator, with some caveats, because, well, Terraform works a little differently than CloudFormation. But yeah, similar idea. Extract the policy, find the thing that is not real, and let's make it real, and then pass that off to the APIs. Okay.
Right, it's time for a demo.
Oh, no. I mean, yay! All right. Yes, so live demo. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to show you is, first I'm going to show you the check no new access in the IAM console, okay? So kind of like how we saw in the screenshot where validate policy is in the IAM console, we have also updated the console to allow you to check for the introduction of new access. So I just pulled up a policy here in the editor. If I edit it, okay, here we go. Let's say that, well first, just to show you, down here at the bottom right, so kind of near the policy validator things, it says check for new access. If you click that, you will see this, and you will note it says, hey, well there's a charge associated with this. It's small, but we don't want you to, transparency, right? Make sure you know what's going on. And so I haven't modified anything, so if I check the policy, it'll say, hey, nope, no new access. Well, obviously, I haven't edited anything yet. Okay, but let's say that, let's say I did something crazy, like I deleted this condition, which restricts access to this bucket to just one account. And then I check my policy again. It will say, actually, you did introduce some new access, and it is in this statement. So how did it know that? It wasn't because I changed an action. It was because I removed a condition that actually constrained what principals could access this. Okay. So if we put that back, we put the condition back and check again, it'll say, nope, it's all good. And then let's say I did something a little better, like I thought, well, maybe I don't really need delete bucket because that's kind of a lot. And then check again, and it'll say, nope, you're good. You did, in fact, decrease the permission surface. Okay? So there you go. So console. In fact, I had a solutions architect one time tell me, he said, one time I made a policy update. The policy was really complicated. And I changed a condition, I just tweaked it. And effectively, it turned the policy into allow star. And he was like, I really wish I could have figured that out ahead of time. Well, guess what? With this, you could. Because you click that button and it would say, hey, it's more permissive. And you're like, what? Really? Okay. So that's console. And console's cool, but as a developer, I don't really use the console that much. I like to use things like pipelines, right? I do things in CI/CD. So ahead of time, I created this pipeline, a really simple one. So just to show you how it works, there's only 3 steps. There's one that sources a change from code commit. So somebody goes and commits a change. Code commit gets the new code. Then we're going to run a build step, which is going to run check no new access and check access not granted, our 2 new APIs. And then it's going to deploy if those things pass. Okay? So the one other thing that you need to know about this setup is you might ask, well, where are, oh, okay. So I have a bucket here, S3 bucket, that contains 2 files. One is my reference policy, right, for the check no new access, and one is my list of sensitive actions for the check access not granted, right? So this pipeline is going to pull those 2 things in. Okay, let's go see what those look like. So my reference policy, well, it's kind of small. Let me make it bigger. You can see it says, we're cool allowing anything except pass roll on any of these sensitive roles. Shouldn't be doing that. All right, so that's our reference policy. Let's make sure people don't do that stuff. And here's our sensitive actions. Well, it's not very exciting. It's just DynamoDB delete table, but something that you probably don't want people doing very often. Okay, so this is what our pipeline is going to do. All right, so here's my IAM policy, and you'll note it's actually a CloudFormation. It's defined in CloudFormation, so we are using this open source CFN policy validator tool that I mentioned earlier to run these checks. So, and here's all this does. The policy says allow these things and allow a pass roll. Okay. Okay, so let's say that I was, trying to make Ujjwal have a bad day.
Going rogue.
Yeah, I mean, I would, go in rogue. I would never do that, of course. Okay, so let's say I added DynamoDB delete star, because, that's something I'm not supposed to do. And let's also say, my sensitive roles. Let's also say I can type. Ooh, and in fact, let me make sure, let's just do it upright. Let me go grab the real good role, my custom admin role. Yep, it was me. Oh, actually here, for funsies, I'm gonna lie and say it was Ujjwal. Okay. All right, so we're gonna commit that. Okay, and then we go back to our pipeline. And this is the part where we wait, in case you didn't know. Running a pipeline, we did some timing. It takes about 2 minutes to do this.
While we're waiting, Jeremiah, I have a question about these custom checks.
Yeah.
So these sensitive actions you say, right? Why can't I just create an SCP and just outright block it for my entire organization? Why do I even need to prevent it for certain?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ujjwal, you could create an SCP, but if you create an SCP for things like S3 delete bucket, well, that would mean nobody in the org could ever delete a bucket, which is probably somebody should be able to do that once in a while, right?
Yep.
Yeah, or DynamoDB delete table, same idea, right?
Are you feeling up to one question from the audience?
Oh, right. Go for it. What's your one question?
Instead of SCP, we use the permission boundary.
What's that?
Permission boundary.
What about permission boundaries?
So basically, the actions we want to restrict from a list,
Yeah.
they can be restricted in the permission boundary that will be specific to that policy.
Right. Okay. So the question or the point was, well, you could actually define a permission boundary and just restrict permissions that way. You're right. However, there are some kind of gray area things where it's generally, no, you shouldn't be able to do this. But if I apply a permission boundary, it means you definitely can't, ever, right? So it's kind of more as the security person, I kind of want to, I can have a bigger reach. I can say, well, I at least want to inspect these uses of things.
There might be certain situations where you might actually be able to allow it, where you would want to do a manual approval as compared to a permission boundary, just deny, not allow in any condition.
Exactly. Oh, let's see. Did we, how are we doing? Okay, still in progress. Oh, see, it took, before it took 2 minutes.
Oh, it failed. Perfect. Right on.
Oh, it failed. Okay. All right.
Failure is success in this scenario.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, that's what I wanted to happen. So hey, it worked. Okay, good. All right. Well, if we go look at the logs, and by that I mean if we scroll through 4,900 and some lines of logs to get to the actual thing that we want to see. Okay, let's see.
Yep.
Right. Oh, yeah. Check no new access. Aha. It says modified permissions grant new access, and that happens in statement 1. Okay. Yeah, which, I mean, that was the one I edited, so sure. All right. And then let's go look at what the other one says. Okay. And this one says, oh, yeah, DynamoDB delete table. That was a bad thing that we made. So, okay, so good. So our pipeline was blocked. It found the 2 things that it wasn't supposed to find, and
I'm happier.
yeah, and Ujwal's happy. Well, that was the goal. Okay. Oh. Well, happily. Oh, that was it. That was my demo. So, all right. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Yes. Yes, and it actually worked. Okay, great. Worked as planned. Okay, additional resources. So, this first link, just this morning, we published a security blog that introduces custom policy checks. And actually, this blog has detailed steps to create the pipeline setup that I just demoed. So if you want to get started, in fact, I literally just followed the blog. It was great. So yeah, I'd say check that out. And if you think this idea of a reference policy, right, making a policy that has all the crazy conditions and things you might want to inspect is interesting, but you're not really sure where to get started, we actually have a whole GitHub repo with a bunch of examples that was made by a security specialist solutions architect. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. Super useful resource. And now is the point where I turn it back over to Ujwal.
All right, thank you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so what Jeremiah talked about was set permissions, or how I like to think about it is least privilege when you're setting new permissions. So what about your permissions or your existing permissions that you've already set? How do you ensure least privilege on your existing permissions? So that's where the verify and refine steps come in. And we have a few existing IAM Access Analyzer capabilities that help you. So I'm going to quickly go through the existing ones because we want to spend more time on the new ones. The existing one, first of the features is policy generation. So in this one, IAM Access Analyzer reviews your CloudTrail logs, looks at access activity for more than 200 services, generates a fine-grained policies based on what is actually used, and also gives you some resource placeholders to customize if you want to restrict the access further to specific resources. The way, or the pro tip, or the way we want you to think about policy generation is, it is a great tool if your applications are stable in a sandbox environment, and if you're looking to promote them to prod, because now you sort of know what specific permissions are actually being used. The next one is external access findings. So we also generate these findings on your resource permissions, and we basically, what Access Analyzer does here is it continuously analyzes access and uses the automated reasoning secret sauce that Jeremiah just talked about for custom policy checks, but it's looking for any public or cross-account access allowed by my resource policies on my attached resources. So these are existing resource policies attached to your resources. It generates comprehensive findings and helps you look at external access or any public or cross-account access. In terms of the supported resources for the external access findings, so we have 11 services and 14 resource types within these 11 services that are supported today by these external access findings. And then finally, so this is about your resource permissions looking at public or cross-account access. What about unused access? Access that you had granted a while ago to your roles, and were never used by your development teams because they never needed it. So we do have last accessed information in our console for specific roles within the specific role details and IAM user page, and also available through IAM APIs, where you can find the last access timestamps for unused IAM roles, unused credentials, which are like console passwords and access keys for your IAM users, and also specifics for active roles and users, also specific service and action permissions that they haven't used but have been granted to them. So this is a great, the last access information is great when you know specifically what role or user you are looking to investigate or inspect. A lot of our customers have been telling us, this is great that I can actually go into a specific role and dive deeper into unused access, but what if I need like visibility at scale, right? And so I'm really happy to announce that just yesterday we announced these unused access findings, which actually give you visibility into unused access at scale. So what does that mean? So basically with this new feature, what IAM Access Analyzer does is that it continuously monitors your environments for unused or broad IAM access. It actually reviews and generates findings for all the roles and users and user credentials that have been unused within a set threshold. So you define what is your period of inactivity. And then it actually, the big change that we've done this time is actually reviews and aggregates it into a centralized summary dashboard. So you can actually visually look at what your posture looks like in terms of unused access. And we've actually extended the dashboard for our external access findings as well. If you are using Security Hub and you're like, I don't actually want to go to IAM Access Analyzer console to look at this stuff, you can actually find the findings in Security Hub itself. So we send our findings to Security Hub as one of the integrated services. Or if you're looking for more automated notifications, you can actually integrate IAM Access Analyzer to EventBridge and actually get events through that you can then integrate into your third-party tools like Slack, for example. All right, so what does this look like? Or how do you get started? As I mentioned, 14 resource types, external access already supported. And we've now introduced unused access. So technically, these are 4 new finding types. Findings for unused IAM access keys, findings for unused IAM user console passwords, unused or inactive IAM roles, and then also for your active IAM users and roles, we will tell you specific services or actions that they are allowed to take action on but haven't taken those actions. In terms of getting started, you just enable the analyzer, it generates the finding, aggregates them into the dashboard, and additionally, you can do the Security Hub or EventBridge integration as well to look at the findings through those avenues. All right, so this is a screenshot, although I will do a live demo of the dashboard as well. This is a screenshot of how your dashboard could look like. Now, one thing I did forget to mention was you can actually create these analyzers at your account level. So you can look at unused access at scale for an account, or you can actually create this analyzer at the AWS organization level. So effectively, you're looking at all of the unused access across all of your accounts at the organization level. The goal with this feature that we're looking for is, as I mentioned at the top, one of the security responsibilities is to inspect IAM configurations over time and then refine broad access. This is a good tool to help you do that. All right. So how this fits in just quickly in terms of the existing access analysis is we already have the public and cross-account findings. We already have the last access information on a per user or role level. All of those are available to you at no additional cost, so you can do anything. You can do basically use those APIs or the console to do that. For these new unused access analysis and the continuous monitoring and the reporting we do, there is an additional charge. And so yeah, I think in terms of pro tip, I would say use these at your, maybe start testing these at your account level to see if these are useful, and then turn them on eventually for your entire organization and start reducing broad permissions, in finding and reducing broad permissions. All right, so now it's time for my demo. So let's get started. All right. So right now I'm in the IAM Access Analyzer console within the IAM console. So I wanted to get started with the setup. So I'm going to get started. So in analyzer settings, you can create an analyzer. As you can see, I already have an analyzer for the unused access analysis as well as one for external access analysis. Just to show you the setup process and how simple it is, you can basically select the type of finding that you want to create the analyzer for. I'm just going to select the new one. You can define the tracking period. So this is basically what you think is your period of inactivity. For the purposes of this demo and because we were lazy and we did not set this up 3 months ago, our tracking period is 5 days. But you could effectively go up until 180 days if you want like a 6-month tracking period for defining inactivity, right? And you can, again, so in terms of the scope of the analysis, you can choose whether to turn this on for your organization or your account. And yeah, and optionally add tags if you want. So since I already have my analyzer created, I'm just going to use that. So as you can see, you have findings here, so 28 findings. It tells you whether it's unused permissions, access keys, an unused role. This is actually at the organization level, so it also tells you the different account IDs. So you can see at the bottom there are a few other account IDs. Yeah, so this is the summary dashboard. So when you click on the dashboard, you will see findings for external access and also findings for unused access. And so the good thing is I don't have any publicly accessible resources, which is good. It's the secure thing to do, especially as the security person, I should not have public access. I do have 12 access from outside of the organization, which in some cases might be okay if you're giving access to your vendors or something like that, to your trusted third party. It also tells me the specific different resource types that allow the cross-account access or public access. And then this is the new unused access findings that we introduced. So it'll tell you there are like 12 unused credentials, 7 unused roles, 9 unused permissions on active roles. And it also gives you a distribution. So you can actually go find out. And then the final thing, is we also tell you what accounts. So we give you an account by account breakup of your unused access findings. So you could actually see that app team 1, hey, Jeremiah, isn't that your account?
Yeah.
So you can see like app team 1 clearly has a lot of findings. So 17 findings. So let me go inspect that. So I click on app team 1. It already filters it by the owning account. And it tells me that, hey, there's a bunch of findings. And I can also filter by the finding type to look at specific findings. So for example, I see this JMD old IAM user has unused access keys. That's not good. I should probably go prod Jeremiah to get him to delete those access keys.
Sorry.
All right. The other thing I could do is I could go to Security Hub. And then in the integrations on the left, I see IAM Access Analyzer is one of the integrations. So you can start or stop accepting findings. I've already done that. So if I go click on See Findings, Security Hub will already filter the findings that they have specifically to IAM Access Analyzer and also provide a severity level. So I'm going to go look at my medium findings. And again, I see that there are some unused roles and also unused access keys that some of my that are there in my across my organization and specifically some in Jeremiah's account. So I can actually go poke Jeremiah to go and remove those. I think just because of time, we're just gonna we actually had this plan where Jeremiah goes and deletes the unused roles, but since we just have 10 minutes left, I'm gonna assume he's gonna do that. Some good.
I will.
Right?
I promise. Right after the session, I'll go delete my unused stuff.
All right. So I'm gonna switch back. So That was the demo of our unused access findings. It's pretty simple on the console. All of these unused access findings, by the way, are available through the API. You can also, as I mentioned, integrate with EventBridge and do that. And Jeremiah, do you want to talk more about other ways that folks can use these findings or our features?
Absolutely. Yeah, so of course, at AWS, we love our partners. We actually have, well, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the launch partners that we've worked with for these new features. So if you're using any of the if you're using third-party products that are provided by these partners, they either already have integrated these features or will have them soon. So yeah, if you use these, you might just get these for free as part of your, part of using the products already. Okay. And of course, we expect that list to just grow over time. So takeaways from our session. So the first and most important is definitely use IAM Access Analyzer on your journey to least privilege, right? Regardless of what features you use. There's lots of good things in there that will help you. If you're at the set phase of your life cycle, use custom policy checks to automate policy reviews. Obviously, definitely use policy validation as well to make sure that your policies are in good shape. At the verify phase, use unused access findings, what Ujjwal just talked through, to centrally inspect, unused things that are in your org. And then finally, the refinement stage, once you see what those are, then it's pretty simple to just go delete them. And that will, make your overall permission surface area smaller, which is what we want. If you really, really loved this content or like this kind of content, there is a breakout session tomorrow that will, it's a 300 level session that will cover a little bit about these features and a bunch of other identity and access management.
It actually goes much deeper into IAM. Access Analyzer is like one part of it, but it also talks about a bunch of other things. Data parameters that we did not specifically talk about, all of those things.
That's right. Yep. So that's a really great session. There are also, if kind of like you saw in the demo, if you actually want to get hands-on with these features, there are 2 workshops. It's a repeat, right? So 1 workshop, but 2 different sessions, 1 tomorrow and 1 on Thursday. Definitely encourage you to go check that out so you can get your hands with this stuff.
I think that includes both the custom policy checks and configuring unused access findings, as well as policy validation, I think, is also included in that.
Nice. Yeah, sounds really useful. And if you want to get the next wave of announcements
from IAM Access Analyzer and other security services.
And lots of other security things, save the date for Reinforce, which is going to be in Philadelphia next year. And final calls to action. If you want, feel free to connect with Ujjwal and I on LinkedIn or shoot us an email if you have additional questions or thoughts. And please fill out the session survey in the app.
Yep, I'm going to be at the booth as well, all 3 days tomorrow onwards, 10 to 12. So if you have more questions.
Yeah, identity and
the security, identity, and compliance booth.
Yeah, nice. Okay, awesome. Thank you all very much for your time.